Welcome to Patscast. I'm Brad Whitaker. A few weeks ago, it was considered a foregone conclusion that Bill Belichick was out in New England. Tommy Curran had a report saying that the Krafts, after the loss in Germany to the Indianapolis Colts, where Mac Jones threw probably the worst interception I've ever seen, the offense just could not get it going in a game that Patriots should have won very easily considering the way their defense played. The Krafts essentially decided that we're done with Bill. This is not going to work out anymore, and the rest of the season would be spent trying to come up with a plan on what to do next. Of course, a short time after that, Ian Rappaport, who may or may not have some connection with Bill Belichick, he reported that Belichick's fate had not yet been decided and could hinge on the remainder of the Patriots season. Well, now we're approaching the end of the season, and the Patriots are actually starting to win some football games in spite of the plague of injuries that they are dealing with. And just to give you an idea, I mean, the defense for the Patriots is still elite, still top 5, still top notch, in spite of losing players like Matthew Judon, Christian Gonzalez. They picked up J.C. Jackson, who's good some games, not so great other games, often commits a lot of penalties, but still in the Patriots system is a number 1 or number 2 corner. Well, we don't really know what's going on with him. He's likely out for the rest of the season for personal reasons. We don't really have the full details there. But then there's Jonathan Jones. He's been banged up. We obviously haven't seen Marcus Jones. They cut Jack Jones, which has actually worked out pretty well for the Las Vegas Raiders. But he had plenty of chances in New England. You can't really get upset about that decision. But the defense has lost some of their better players, and they seem to be playing even better each week. I know they gave up some points, but they're playing pretty conservatively in the second half against Denver on Christmas Eve. And then you look at the offense, okay? The offense hasn't been able to generate anything all season with exception to the Buffalo Bills game with Mac Jones, the Pittsburgh Steelers game, and the Denver Bronco game with Bailey Zappi. And the O-line has rarely been at full strength. They've recently lost Cole Strange for the rest of the season. Trent Brown, no idea what's going on with him. He was on the injury report out with an illness, but they'd have Vidarian Lowe start in his place, who's terrible, and then he'd come in. They brought James Ferentz back, who was basically the reason Bailey Zappi fumbled the football in his first play of the game in Denver. Then you have the weapons at receiver, or lack thereof, that weren't even healthy. You know, Devontae Parker, rarely ever healthy. Juju Smith-Schuster, rarely ever healthy. Demario Douglas missed multiple games with a concussion. He was also in the doghouse earlier this season for like 3 or 4 games after fumbling it against Miami. Lost Kendrick Bourne for the rest of the year. Hunter Henry just missed the last game. They don't have a lot of weapons at receiver, and they've been banged up even with the weapons that they have. And you know, it's probably the worst it's been all season in terms of health, both on the offensive and defensive sides of the football. Yet somehow they are piecing together wins in prime time in tough road environments. Yes, I know Pittsburgh, not the same with Mitch Trubisky, but it's not like they were doing a lot with Kenny Pickett to begin with. And Denver, I don't care what you say about Denver. They won 6 games in a row, and even when they have bad teams going into that environment in prime time in December, I've been to that stadium, probably the loudest in the NFL, at least as an outdoor venue. They went in there with Bailey Zappi and won the game, no problem. Really, it should have never been as close as it was because, like I said, the team gets a big lead and then gets overly conservative and almost blows the game, as we've seen in Pittsburgh and then most recently in Denver. But Bill Belichick, he's going to be able to make the case. Look what I've been dealing with all season. We were de facto eliminated before November, and the team is still playing hard. We're banged up now more than we've been all season, even though we've been hurt all season, and now we're actually starting to win some football games. How, if the greatest coach of all time is in Robert Kraft's office and pitching you that argument, you have to at least listen a little bit, right? Things have changed since the game in Germany against Indianapolis. Things have changed a lot. And what if they went out the rest of the way? Or at the very least, stay competitive against Buffalo and then beat the New York Jets in the season finale? Then Bill can say, we got blown out against Dallas. That wasn't good. Following week against New Orleans, even worse. We got shut out at home. But other than those two games, Patriots have been competitive. If we just had some semblance of an offense, which I'll take some blame for in terms of personnel, we would win probably half of these games that we lost, at least. Just by a flip of a coin, 50-50, we probably would have won the game in New York. We would have won the game against Washington. Maybe we would have won one of those early games against Philadelphia or Miami. We could have beaten some pretty good teams that we stayed competitive with outside of Dallas and New Orleans. Also, what if Zappe keeps getting better? You know, what Zappe? Look, and you can watch. I shot a podcast yesterday and really broke it down. Bailey Zappe has shown, whether we're looking back on his high school days, his college days, where he transferred from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky, now looking at in the NFL, this is a guy that when he gets more playing experience at all levels, continues to get better. And there's no reason to think that can't continue to happen. Again, he played very well in Denver last week. Wasn't asked to do much in the second half when they blew the lead. He was just handing the ball off. But when he had to make plays in the final minute of the fourth quarter, he made two big throws. He moved around in the pocket, and that was the reason they ultimately ended up winning the game. What if Zappe keeps getting better? What if he throws 3 or 4 touchdowns in Buffalo and does really well against that very impressive still New York Jets defense? Then Bill can say, hey, we solved the mystery at quarterback. Doesn't mean we don't draft someone, but we don't have to prioritize getting one of those quarterbacks early in the first round. We can have someone compete with Zappe for the starting job and really build around them and see what we can put together for an offense. So whoever is at quarterback, it's a lot easier on them. And even if it is Zappe, we've seen what he can do these last few weeks. Bill has a really good pitch here, especially if the team continues to close out the season strongly and play the way they did in Pittsburgh and in Denver and in the first half against Kansas City when they actually held a lead for a brief period of time that game. You know, Robert Kraft, he's facing a heavy decision here. You're talking about firing the greatest coach of all time. That's not something you just do mid-season. Why? Because there's always a chance a guy like Bill Belichick can turn things around, and that might be happening as we speak right now. And Bill the coach really isn't so much the issue, right? It's Bill the GM. You know, he struck out countless times drafting wide receivers. He ignored the tackle position in the offseason until it was too late. I drafted Cole Strange in the first round. Cole Strange looks like he's going to be pretty good in spite of the injury that knocked him out for the rest of the season. But they could have gotten him in the second, third, maybe even the fourth round if you look at the way other teams were evaluating him, for a guard. And he's rarely prioritized the offense in terms of personnel decisions. So, they need to do something there when it comes to being a GM. Doesn't mean Bill is, completely a lost cause there. We know he can still draft defensive players. Christian Barmore, probably going to be a red jacket guy by the end of his career, at least the trend that he's on right now. He can still find gems in the later rounds, even on offense. They got Demario Douglas in the 6th round. And, he can evaluate undrafted players and really find those gems that are often overlooked by teams that are really just focusing on the first, second, and third rounds of the NFL draft. If Bill is to stay, you would think the Krafts would still want to see something different at GM, right? Like, you either give Dave Ziegler another chance with some more power over player personnel. I don't love that decision because Ziegler has been a part of some of these draft decisions that were ultimately Belichick's. I'm not sure how different Ziegler's mind is compared to Bill's. But we'd love to see them bring in a young stud like Adam Peters from San Francisco. He's worked with the Patriots in the past. You've seen what they've done with John Lynch. That team just continues to find players, make the right transactions. They brought in Christian McCaffrey, who could ultimately be the MVP this year. They figured out ways to make it work in San Francisco, despite not being the best at the quarterback position. I think Brock Purdy probably isn't going to win the MVP now after the way he performed against Baltimore the other day. But Bill, as an X's and O's coach, still one of the very best in the league. You have to say that. Doesn't mean I don't have issues with some of the things Bill Belichick has done. I think like I said earlier, they get a big lead, they tend to play scared, but that probably has more to do with the player personnel he's dealing with, which is his fault. But, if you say, hey, this team can't take more chances because we're ultimately going to turn the ball over, then you play really conservative and run the ball with a big lead in the second half, as they did in Pittsburgh and in Denver. Hopefully they can be a little bit more aggressive and turn those blowouts into actual blowouts. But, moving on from Bill is a big decision. Not just because he's the greatest coach of all time, because he fills so many voids in that organization, either with himself or with some of his buddies that are there. I mean, what happens to Steve Belichick if you fire Bill as the head coach and the GM? Does Steve Belichick just stay in New England? That'd be a little bit weird, right? He's probably going to go wherever Bill goes. And as the players say, Steve's been a big part of the reason the defense has succeeded there. Also, who would be a better head coaching candidate than Bill Belichick right now? Ben Johnson in Detroit. He's a brilliant offensive mind, but does that mean he's ready to be a head coach? You can say the same about Eric Bieniemy, who's with Washington now. He was the Chiefs' offensive coordinator with Patrick Mahomes. We've seen what that offense has done with Bieniemy and what they haven't done this season without him. His value has never been higher because the Chiefs really are struggling on offense without that real play caller. But same issue exists with him as it does with Ben Johnson. Is he going to be a good head coach? He's going to be good on the offensive side of the football, but what are you sacrificing on the defensive side with special teams, with the whole culture of the organization? I think Bieniemy, probably his value continues to skyrocket the more the Chiefs struggle on offense, but that's definitely not a sure thing. There's also Mike Vrabel, right? Players really like Mike Vrabel. He's a good motivation guy. He probably can attract free agents. He's still a young head coach, but he's also an offshoot of Bill Belichick, and it's not like motivation has been a problem for the Patriots under Bill Belichick this year. In fact, if anything, the players are more motivated. They are taking these Belichick firing rumors personally and trying to win for their coach. You see after the game, coach, this one's for you. Or was it Matt Slater? I've heard a number of players say it. We've had great game plans. It's just on us to execute. Bill's not the problem. It's on us as players to fulfill what Bill's trying to do. Then there's Gerard Mayo, who's considered the heir apparent. But how much of the defense is Bill Belichick? How much of it is Gerard Mayo? We don't really know. I'd say it's probably a little bit of both. Not to mention Mayo, he's only 37 years old. Does that mean he's ready to be an NFL head coach? Isn't the ideal situation you spend another couple years with Belichick, let him pass Don Shula's record, and then you promote Gerard Mayo and have a great, farewell to Belichick, and Belichick and Mayo still have a good relationship? That's the ideal scenario. So moving on from Bill is not as simple as it sounds, particularly if this weekend, already weak roster is continuing to win football games. And, Bill, that's what he's going to say. We were banged up all season. We had a tough schedule, but we started figuring things out. Here's my plan at general manager, or perhaps I'm willing to give up that role because I really do want to stay in New England. And I think we're all set, whether it's with Bailey Zappi or another quarterback, because this team has really started to come together, and I think we've built on something that can head into the 2024 season and make us a winning football team. And maybe it's just as simple as fixing player personnel, right? You fix the personnel issue, you bring in a real good young GM that understands how to mess with the salary cap a little bit more than Bill Belichick can, and bring in players without, having to take on too much debt down the road. Bill has always been good with the salary cap. That's part of the reason Robert Kraft brought him there, but he doesn't do kind of the modern things that GMs do to kind of move cap space around to ultimately bring in really good players. I mean, San Francisco is just loaded with talent on that team, and it's expensive talent, and yet they find a way to make it work. I'd love to see Belichick take a little bit off of his plate there, focus more on the defense, and continue to do what he's doing there, and then continue to delegate some of the offense to whether it's Bill O'Brien or maybe you bring back Josh McDaniels. I don't think that's a terrible idea. Maybe you bring them both back. They've worked together and they worked well together. You have McDaniels as the quarterback's coach and O'Brien as the offensive coordinator, the play caller, or maybe they split play calling duties. Who knows? But take a little bit off of Belichick's plate at the end of his career, build on where his strengths are at, and then find ways to delegate when it comes to player personnel and the offense. And that might ultimately be the best decision right now. But again, 6 weeks ago, I was arguing Bill Belichick should be gone. So a lot has changed. Let me know, how do you feel about the potential departure of Bill Belichick? Should he be fired? Should he not? Has your mind changed over these last few weeks? If you're watching on YouTube, please let me know in the comments below.